What can you find in an old picture except the painful contortions of the artist trying to break uncrossable barriers which obstruct the full expression of his dream? To admire an old picture is to pour our sensibility into a funeral urn instead of casting it forward with violent spurts of creation and action. Do you want to waste the best part of your strength in a useless admiration of the past, from which you will emerge exhausted, diminished, trampled on? This is a quote from the Futurist Manifesto, written by Italian poet Filippo Tommaso Marinetti, and published in 1909. With this work, he and his cohort announced to the world a new movement that fetishized industrial progress and man's triumph over nature. Recognizing that the world had entered into a new age of unprecedented technological innovation, they unabashedly declared that humanity should free itself from the shackles of the traditions, tastes, and morals of the past in pursuit of, well, the future. Progress, to them, should come at any expense, even that of human life. In addition to valorizing war and violence, the core Italian futurists were also ardent nationalists, seeing this movement as Italy's opportunity to reassert itself onto the world stage, instead of acting as a sort of nursing home for antiquity. Oh, and they also hated feminism and women broadly, so it should come to no surprise then that many of these Italian futurists became fascists in the coming decades. But back to the quote. The futurists weren't just a let the past die sort of group, they wanted to kill the past. Literally demolishing museums and libraries was a core tenet of their manifesto. And while the proper futurist movement peaked back in the 20s and 30s, you can still find elements of their philosophy permeating throughout our culture today. Specifically this one core theme, this reckless contempt for what came before. It's something that hasn't completely gone away. And I see that theme popping up time and time again, and to be frank, it troubles me. I don't know if it's just me, but the last few years of the internet have felt pretty stagnant. Maybe it's nostalgia goggles kicking in, but I feel like the current internet climate feels much less optimistic and exciting compared to the 2000s and the 2010s. Back then, we saw an explosion of new web-based services and products that were redefining entire industries. Everything from managing sales funnels to doing taxes to watching movies. The sky was the limit. But now, markets have become saturated. The competitive fronts between different companies have become increasingly entrenched. And so, in pursuit of continuously increasing profits, companies have turned to squeezing more money from the end user, while the industry as a whole desperately searches for its next iPhone moment. Many companies and investors thought they were onto something with the metaverse, or putting blockchain technology into everything for absolutely no fucking reason, or whatever other buzzword was being thrown around. For a bit, it seemed like the emperor had no clothes, but it looks like the bubble has finally popped on that Silicon Valley dream. And now the industry has looked to AI as the next major frontier for tech. But as impressive as generative chatbots like ChatGPT can be, AI isn't the saving grace for the internet. And in a lot of ways, its novelty is distracting us from some really worrying trends that are making the internet a far worse place to be. There isn't really an overarching thesis to this video. This is mostly just a collection of stories that really bother me and seem to suggest that the internet is headed for a far less interconnected future, where all websites become walled gardens, where every last dime is squeezed out of each individual user, and where the internet as a whole becomes less useful and less usable. Oh, Twitter. Oh boy, Twitter. What a riot it's been. Ever since Elon Musk took the company's reins back in October, it's been nothing but questionable decision after questionable decision. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to rewrite this script because of some new batshit insane thing that Twitter decided to do. Twitter's advertising revenue in the US is down 59% compared to last year, following a mass exodus of advertisers. And Twitter Blue has only been able to scrounge back $11 million of the hundreds of millions of dollars that the company potentially lost in revenue. And that number is probably pretty outdated. Newer data has shown that more than half of Twitter Blue's earliest subscribers are no longer subscribed to the service. Musk has made it clear that he wants to transform Twitter into X, an omnipotent super app, your all-in-one place for communication, finances, and media consumption akin to WeChat in China. And we've seen Twitter go full steam ahead into transforming itself. Twitter Inc. has been renamed X Corp, Musk has announced that more robust DMs and video calls will be eventually coming, and users can now trade stocks on Twitter in a partnership with eToro. However, in all honesty, I think the most significant and telling change that Twitter has implemented so far revolves around access to its API. For those of you who don't know, API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's the protocol that's used to communicate between different computer programs. So if you need to push data or send a command from one system to another, anything from Google Sheets to Salesforce to Stripe, you would use an API for it. APIs are pretty ubiquitous throughout the internet, and for consumer-grade online services, it's pretty rare that access to the API is put behind a paywall, and this is especially the case for social media. But back in February of this year, Twitter did just that. Developers and researchers were stunned to discover that they would have to start paying to access Twitter's API. Hundreds of accounts announced that they were shutting down, all because of this change. From the National Weather Service sending out weather updates, to local transportation authorities sending out transportation updates, and of course, fun gimmick accounts. Musk claimed that the reason for this was to limit bot spam, but developers have claimed that the real spam comes from scripts injected into Twitter's web client or from stolen API keys. And while some of the original API plans have been walked back, like through the reintroduction of a free tier, albeit an extremely limited one, this is, in addition to removing API access to third-party clients, a clear signal that the future of Twitter will be more and more hostile to its developer community, and that it wants to become a walled garden for the internet. Also, something really funny that I found is that in order to request access to Twitter's enterprise API, you have to fill out a fucking Google form. It sends you to a Google form. People who are going to be paying $42,000 a month are sent to a Google form. It's so funny. In the wake of this change, we've seen Reddit follow suit. Reddit will begin charging for access to its API, pricing out many developers who manage third-party clients for the site, even ones that offer tools to help communities manage and moderate themselves that Reddit flatly does not offer out of the box. Reddit's reasoning for this is twofold. For one, it has rightly identified that there is a lot of useful, easily accessible information on the platform. I mean, how many times have you gone to search something on Google and appended Reddit to the end of your query? Which is something we're going to discuss later, by the way. But anyway, because of this, Reddit is hoping to protect itself from data scraping. OpenAI previously revealed that Reddit was indeed one of the sources used to train its AI models, and Reddit doesn't want that to happen again without getting a cut. Also, as Reddit continues to putt around the idea of going public, it wants to find new ways to monetize itself. In case it's not obvious, all of this not only makes things worse for developers, but also for users. It limits what can be done on these sites and advances the idea that there can and should only be one way, one set of approved channels for a user to interact with the site. It makes these sites less useful by eliminating automated accounts that supply good information. It limits the data that you can get about your own and others' internet presence. It limits the research that can be done on these sites and on their communities. And it flat out limits human creativity by restricting developers from creating different and unique user experiences. Back in May of this year, Google announced that it will be deleting inactive Google accounts en masse, specifically those that haven't seen any activity in 2 years. Countless emails, attachments, Google Drive files, photos, and more will be deleted at the end of this year. And what struck me the most was just how poorly this change was announced. It was just casually dropped in a security blog post, and the lack of detail had people speculating as to whether this would mean that entire channels on YouTube would be removed if the associated Google account hadn't been active. The fact that they only updated the blog post after this backlash just shows that they really didn't care enough to think about this the first go round, or maybe that they were actually thinking about deleting YouTube videos at first. But God, even after they clarified these changes, things still looked pretty bad. Imagine you have a dead family member and you didn't know how to recover their account until it was too late. Or, I don't know, you were in a coma, or God forbid you were imprisoned for whatever reason. Imagine your Google account, the crux of your online identity, being erased in an instant. Poof, gone forever. You have to start from scratch and also fight an uphill battle proving that you are who you say you are. Twitter has also announced that they'll be doing the same thing, that they would begin purging inactive accounts. Whereas Google at least had the courtesy to say that it was for security reasons, it seems like Twitter is literally just trying to trim off as much fat as they can. Their official policy states that an account risks deletion if it's inactive for 30 days, a month. Imgur also decided recently that a bunch of old photos and forum content just wasn't worth keeping around anymore, despite these forums being the original reason Imgur got popular in the first place. All the while, streaming services like Disney+, HBO Max, now dubbed just Max, Hulu, and Showtime have removed access to dozens and dozens of movies and TV shows. And it's not just content that they've licensed from other companies, it also includes movies and shows produced in-house. By limiting their libraries to current or uber popular content, these companies can take advantage of certain tax breaks, in some cases, or eliminate the costs of licensing fees or residuals that they pay out to the content's creators. Literally less than 6 months after wrapping up its first season, the Disney Plus fantasy series Willow was pulled from streaming. That's just crazy. I mean, everyone complains about the content, Mel, but it's just so unbelievably cruel to see a piece of art that people have spent years of their lives working on being tossed away like it's nothing. All this while, there's a writer's strike going on, mind you, to add insult to injury. This also means that, in many cases, there's no longer a legal means of watching this content. And while these sites are deleting content of their own volition, other organizations are being forced to remove content from the web. Another pillar of the Internet Archive, was dealt a major blow in a lawsuit back in March. Book publishers argued that there was no legal basis for the Internet Archive to lend out digital books, even through controlled digital lending, and the courts agreed. While the Internet Archive is appealing, it's still so tragic to think that such a wealth of knowledge could be rendered utterly useless. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to the particulars of the case with any authority, but boy, does it feel like publishers would outlaw brick-and-mortar libraries if they could. Free and open access to information is at the core of the internet's ethos, and well, it's just so sad to see so much of that information going up in smoke. Companies only see value in data that makes them money, and so these accounts and their associated data are designated as digital excess. If anything, these actions by major online platforms highlight the fragility of our digital experiences and serve as a reminder of the unfortunate impermanence of the information we create and consume daily. The state of online search right now is pretty disgusting. If you innocently type something into Google, Google then blasts you with a deluge of ads, carousels, and widgets that it thinks you want. And then once you get to the organic search results, it's filled to the brim with generic, soulless, keyword-ridden listicles that, more often than not, frankly don't answer your question. It's quite the development that in the world of online search, the burden of curation has shifted back to the user. This is all due to the ubiquity of search engine optimization, or SEO, the process of formatting and writing web content in ways that appeal to search engine crawlers and algorithms. SEO, however, is less straightforward than it sounds. In reality, search engine optimization as a field is constantly changing, feeds off of infrequent and ambiguous hints that Google reveals about its algorithm, requires ample trial and error, and as you may have guessed, is fraught with ostensibly know-it-all gurus and a hefty dose of snake oil. I'm not alone for my contempt for how SEO practices have sterilized and homogenized the internet. However, in many ways, it's a monster of Google's own making. As one writer puts it, Google has been playing an endless game of whack-a-mole, trying to combat SEO marketers from abusing Google's algorithm for their own benefit by giving their sites all the trappings of authoritative content. And naturally, with more traffic, you're able to make more money by serving ads or by funneling users into using your product or service. And even on sites with useful content, you oftentimes have to scroll through a whole dissertation to find what you're looking for. Because many sites cater to the tastes of Google's algorithm and not the end user, trying to find answers on the internet frequently sucks. Like I said before, more often than not, you're more likely to find what you're looking for by appending Reddit to the end of your query and then digging through forums. Alternatively, many youngsters have started using TikTok as a search engine, seeking more authentic and personal sources of information that way. Even Google has admitted that around 40% of Gen Zers go to TikTok or Instagram instead of Google for certain search queries. And it's not just the results are less helpful, there are also dangerous implications for internet history. In the pursuit of hosting evergreen content that'll reliably attract an audience long term, articles and blog posts are constantly rewritten. New hyperlinks, better headings, better headlines, better copy. This is all done to make the content more marketable and to continue to drive users to it. However, there's something sad about history being rewritten with little to no disclosure. Web publishers also frequently prune content on their sites that is out of date or not in vogue. As another writer puts it, this all results in an internet with no institutional memory or accountability. So when Google and Bing announced that generative AI responses will be taking center stage in search going forward, some people hailed this as an incredible development, hoping that it would actually give users the answers that they're looking for more quickly. Others have hailed it as the death of SEO, as these generative AI responses, while they cite where they get their information from, will kill off a good chunk of organic search traffic. And from the looks of things, it looks like generative AI responses in search just flat out sucks and causes more problems than it solves. It flat out plagiarizes some responses, and the parts that it doesn't plagiarize are often just wrong because it just string words together that it thinks are likely to appear next to each other. In order for it to deliver the quality of user experience people expect, it would be better sometimes just for it to flat out plagiarize. But that comes at the cost of screwing over the people who made that information available in the first place. Also, since it's scraping sites that are often written to be optimized for search, I expect that we'll see plenty of situations where it's just going to be garbage in, garbage out. I mean, there are situations where users themselves can't even find the information that they're looking for, and Google/Bing's generative AI models are going to be looking at the exact same web pages that the users are going through. So I sincerely doubt that these generative responses will be able to do what users can't. And to make matters worse, Google and Bing have both announced that they'll be placing ads into their generative search responses, meaning that even when these generative responses turn out to be useful, they'll be riddled with ads, making the user experience all the more tedious. Google and Bing are putting more junk in between the user and the information they're looking for, and essentially are punishing sites that have good information for having good information. As far as I can tell, when these models have good information to work with, they can do some pretty amazing things. But that's just not how the internet exists right now. Maybe it's a technical problem that can be solved over time, but nonetheless, it's still pretty shameful and condescending for companies to push something so broken onto the masses so quickly and to greatly overpromise on its capabilities. Back when search engines first came onto the scene, they solved a very specific problem and made all corners of the internet accessible in one place. But today, it feels like that most search engines have abandoned that commitment to user centricity. And while Google has been taking steps to provide search results that connect users to real-world experiences, it's obvious that connecting users with this sort of content directly is not Google's priority. Only through a commitment to user empowerment can we hope to restore the value and utility of online search in an era dominated by algorithms and AI. Recently, some YouTube users have gotten notices that they'll be required to disable their ad block going forward or otherwise opt into YouTube Premium. I'm a little surprised that they haven't done this a while ago, but yet again, we're at a crossroads where the user experience continues to suffer. But honestly, there's a more insidious and potentially harmful set of changes happening that I haven't really heard anyone discuss too much, and that's Chrome's transition to its Manifest v3 extension platform. A manifest file is one of the many files required in a Chrome extension and defines the level of access to browser data and system resources that it requires, as well as its capabilities. Back in 2018, Google announced the beginning of their transition to Manifest v3, replacing Manifest v2. And while the timeline of this transition has been delayed a handful of times, there are some serious consequences associated with these new specifications. The big one being that it will undermine the effectiveness of adblock extensions and extensions that anonymize user information. While Google is asserting that these changes to the manifest are for the sake of privacy, something that many developers dispute, it conveniently will also have the effect of having websites show more ads, which is what Google's whole business model is based around. And the scariest part is that these changes won't be limited to just Chrome. They'll affect all Chromium-based browsers like Edge, Brave, Opera, and more. The only web browser of note that has pushed back against these changes is Firefox, saying that they'll continue to support web request blocking features from Manifest v2, which are the foundation of anti-tracking extensions and ad blockers. But that's what we get when one company essentially becomes the gatekeeper for access to the internet. Once they have that power, it's only a matter of time before they use it for their own benefit. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, a lot of futurists did become fascists later in life. However, that was not a universal rule. Futurism actually found a home on all sides of the political spectrum. And that's because, while some tenets of Marinetti's Futurist Manifesto were reactionary, the core of the Futurist project was not. The one thing that I think the Futurist movement deserves a lot of praise for is that it brought into the mainstream a newfound optimism for the future. They glorified technological advancement because they saw good in it. They celebrated human ingenuity as a freeing force. Over 100 years later, though, I struggle to find that sense of optimism, at least regards to the modern internet. It seems like there's a roadblock on every road to progress, or any progress that's been made on the internet is being ratcheted backwards. When corporations put the onus of their growth onto the shoulders of its users, nothing good can come of it. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing more and more of lately. While doing research for this video, I came across one article that, I think, perfectly encapsulates where we're headed. We are living through the end of the useful internet. The future is informed discussion behind locked doors, in discords and private fora, with the public-facing web increasingly filled with detritus generated by LLMs, bearing only a stylistic resemblance to useful information. Finding unbiased and independent product reviews, expert tech support, and all manner of helpful advice will now resemble the process by which one now searches for illegal sports streams or pirated journal articles. The decades of real human conversation hosted at places like Reddit will prove useful training material for the mindless bots and deceptive marketers that replace it. And while the recent blackouts by several subreddits are certainly admirable, it doesn't change the fact that Reddit and all of the other companies I've talked about have ownership of these platforms. They are businesses who have a legal obligation to maximize their profit for their investors and can make whatever changes they like regardless of our own feelings. But nonetheless, this would be the end of the internet as we know it. Entire networks of people, incredibly passionate people across all sorts of sites, are at risk of breaking down or eroding away or hiding in some shadowy corner. And that's just such a sad and unthinkable prospect. It's crucial to address these trends to ensure that the internet remains a vibrant and inclusive space for innovation and collaboration. By advocating for this openness, supporting developers and independent creators, and demanding transparency, we can, hopefully, work towards a more interconnected and user-friendly internet that actually enriches our lives. I've been 1C2. Thanks for watching.